Right, whenever you are ready.
Okay, my claim of fact is about minimum wage, and that the government installed the minimum wage so that businesses can pay the lowest amount on their workers. But it only has negative effects on the economy. My first point is that minimum wage causes businesses to limit the number of people they can hire. It doesn't cause them unemployment, but they can't lower it. And my second point is that minimum wage does help assist with inflation, which is the prices of goods, increasing price of goods, while at the same time also decreasing the production of goods. And the last point about minimum wage, it does have negative effects on the working class. Okay, when businesses hire workers, they're looking for an amount of how much they're willing to pay, and the number of people willing to work for a company is based on how much they're willing to offer. Now it's like a basic supply and demand of these workers, and it reaches this equilibrium, like a little point in which both can be satisfied, where the business can hire this many workers, give the price without any shortage or surplus of any extra workers. But the minimum wage is where the prices stand for workers, so it kind of prevents businesses to lower the prices. So they can only hire a certain amount, but there will be exceeding amount of people wanting that job. So many more people are going to go unemployed, than employed at the business. So the unemployment rate will never lower as long as minimum wage is in effect. My next point is about how minimum wage is, when minimum wage increases, businesses need to cut costs of production. They need to figure out ways to cut these costs down from what materials to how much they're supplying. And then once they cut the production down, there will be a shortage of the goods because people are still demanding, since the price hasn't changed yet. So the businesses need to figure out how to lower the demand for people for buying these goods. So they just say, hey, we just increase the price. And since the minimum wage cannot be lowered, because it's the law, they cannot lower it. They have to, and they cannot cut down any worker. They have to cut down all other costs, including the non-worker price. So every time minimum wage increases, the business can become a high cost, low production business, which just could end up causing the business to shut down on itself. Until they find other alternative costs. And the last point is working classes can be affected negatively on the minimum wage. When CBS News article, "A Minimum Wage But Not Much Living," explains how minimum wage was set up only to survive, set to gain the needs of people, like how much, like food, water, shelter, and gas. But they cannot. But when those cost of living increases, minimum wage can hardly keep up with the cost. So the only way to counter it was to increase minimum wage. But then that goes to reference back that the businesses need to increase their prices again. So and one of the costs they cost was benefits. So these working class people are losing benefits from their employers because they have to cut down more costs to supply their minimum wage. So now, so working class people are in the same situation, maybe even worse than they are before. In the conclusion, minimum wage is an ineffective method to helping the economy, since it seems to have negative effects. Minimum wage only prevents unemployment from going down and increases inflation and lowering of production of goods, and the working classes are losing benefits because they get only a small amount increase in their pay. And that's my report.
Thank you. All right, Zane, there are a couple of things that I think are working well and a couple of things that are problematic. I thought that your proposition was identified at the beginning, but it's not very clearly worded. At the end of the speech, it's much clearly worded. You basically are saying the minimum wage law harms the economy, and I think that you need to have that as a more specific declarative statement at the beginning of the speech. On the other hand, you did have a very good layout of what the secondary claims were going to be, and you listed them and gave each of them before we actually got to the body of the speech. So that helps structure it as we get into this. I do think you might want to spend a little bit of time explaining in the introduction why we're talking about this right now. We've had a minimum wage law since the late 1930s. Why is it all of a sudden important for you to talk about 80 years later? And there are reasons why it's still in the news, because there are talks about changing the minimum wage. California's already taken action on that. There's a national discussion about that sort of thing. So I think you could include that at the beginning of the speech to give us a reason to care about this particular subject. Organizationally, the signposting is very good. We know where you are at any given point. You do a good job indicating what the claims are on those points as you get to them, so there's no problem there. The biggest problem in the speech is that everything is an explanation. At the end of the speech, you probably recognized it sounded like you hesitated a little bit when you called your presentation a report, because it's really supposed to be an argument. The problem is, I think it really ends up sounding like a report. What you've done is you've given us an explanation of the theories on each of these points without providing any proof that those theories are correct, and that is in fact what happens. And I think that that's the problem. At best, on the first point, we get hypothetical examples. There's no statistical information. There's one place where it sounds like there might be some testimony. That's from that CBS information that you cite. But even that sounds mostly like it's just quoting some factual data on the subject. Other than that, I don't know what information you're using to advance these theories, much less try to prove those claims. I thought that you did a pretty good job presenting things. Like I said, it was easy to follow. You look at the audience directly, but your proof is insufficient to support the theories that you're presenting. And like I said right at the end, when you call it a report, unfortunately that's not too far from the truth. You need to make it more of an argument rather than just a report on what the minimum wage is all about. All right, thank you.